The heavy curtains in the living room were drawn, but even so, the dim afternoon light managed to penetrate, painting dusty stripes in the air. I sat in the burgundy velvet armchair, a place that had always seemed like a safe harbor to me, but now resembled more of a prison cell. The reading of my father-in-law's will had ended just moments ago, and the silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the tick-tock of the wall clock, each second hammering home the injustice that had just been perpetrated. My husband, John, was beside me, his face pale and confused. His sister, Susan, stood across the room with a barely disguised look of triumph. The lawyer, a suited and impassive man, gathered his papers with the coldness of someone accustomed to seeing families torn apart by money. For decades, I had dedicated my life to the family business, Thompson & Sons, a small lumber company that my father-in-law had built from scratch. I had set aside my own dreams of opening a flower shop, worked tirelessly in the office, handling accounting, contracts, clients, everything that allowed John and his father to focus on production. I was the silent gear that kept everything running. And now, nothing. My name wasn't in the will. The company, the house, the savings, everything would be divided between John and Susan. I would receive nothing. It was as if the last 30 years of my life had been erased, as if I had never existed. The humiliation hit me like a punch to the stomach. It wasn't just about the money, although financial security was important. It was about recognition, about respect, about dignity. They had used me, drained my energy and creativity, and then discarded me like a piece of trash. I saw Susan's condescending look of pity. I imagined what they were thinking, that I would simply accept my fate, that I would retreat in silence, that I would disappear without making noise. Maybe that's what they expected. But something inside me refused to yield. A cold and relentless rage began to bubble up. I wouldn't leave quietly. I would fight, and they would regret having underestimated me. But exactly how I would do that was still unknown, and perhaps that was the most frightening part of all. That night, sleep didn't come. I tossed and turned in bed, feeling the familiar mattress seem strange and hostile. John snored softly beside me, oblivious to the storm forming inside me. I stared at the ceiling, desperately trying to organize my thoughts. The anger was a tight knot in my throat, but the hurt was even deeper. An open wound, bleeding betrayal and disappointment. I got up silently, put on my robe, and went downstairs. I needed air, space, clarity. The house was dark and quiet. Only the faint moonlight invaded through the windows. I walked to the kitchen and prepared a cup of chamomile tea, the gentle aroma calming me minimally. I sat at the table, watching the garden through the window. The roses I had planted with such care looked wilted and discouraged under the pale light. That's when I remembered the old photo album I kept in the attic. An album full of memories from the company, moments we had shared together. Maybe there I would find some spark, some proof of my worth, something to give me strength to fight. I climbed the stairs silently, the floorboards creaking slightly under my feet. The attic was a dusty and forgotten place, full of boxes and old furniture. I rummaged through things until I found the album. I sat on the floor, opening it carefully. The photos were a painful flashback. Me, young and full of hope, beside John and his father, smiling at the camera. Photos of company events, business trips, birthdays, and celebrations. In each one, I was there, present and active, working behind the scenes, making sure everything went smoothly. I found one particular photo that caught my attention. It was from the company's 25th anniversary. I was cutting the cake while John and his father watched me with pride. I remembered the speech I gave that day, talking about the importance of teamwork and dedication, words that now sounded empty and ironic. At that moment, it hit me. I didn't have concrete proof, documents, or contracts that proved my contribution. But I had the memories, the recollections of all those years of hard work and sacrifice, and these memories were my weapon. I decided I wouldn't hire a lawyer immediately. Instead, I would investigate on my own. I would look for documents, receipts, emails, anything that could help me build a solid case. And above all, I would talk to people, clients, suppliers, former employees, anyone who could testify about my role in the company. I still didn't know what the path would be like, but one thing was certain. I wouldn't give up. I would fight for what was rightfully mine, not just for the money, but for my dignity and my legacy. And the first person I needed to talk to was the company's accountant, a man who knew the secrets of Thompson & Sons like no one else. Hope was reborn, mixed with the determination of someone who has nothing to lose and everything to reclaim. The next morning, I got up before sunrise. John was still sleeping, his face relaxed and serene. I watched him for a moment, trying to reconcile the man I loved with the person who had betrayed me, even if indirectly. His guilt was perhaps the worst of all, the guilt of omission, of negligence in defending my interests. I left a short note on the nightstand, saying I needed to sort some things out and would be back later. I didn't want to confront him yet. I needed time to process everything, to strengthen my determination. I put on neutral and discreet clothes, wore my most comfortable shoes, and left the house before any neighbor could see me. I drove to the Thompson & Sons office, the place that had been my second home for so many years and which now seemed like hostile territory. I parked the car on the street, a few blocks away, and walked to the building. I observed the familiar facade, the sign with the company name, the windows I had looked through during so many long hours of work. I felt a tightness in my chest, a mixture of nostalgia and bitterness. I took a deep breath and entered the building. The receptionist, a young woman named Emily, greeted me with a smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. Good to see you. What brings you here?" I forced a smile back. "Good morning, Emily. I need to speak with Mr. Peterson. It's urgent." Mr. Peterson, the accountant, the key to unraveling the secrets of Thompson & Sons. Emily looked at me hesitantly. "He's in a meeting now, Mrs. Thompson. Can I schedule for another day?" "No, Emily. I need to see him now. Tell him it's urgent and I can't wait." Emily sighed and dialed a number on the phone. "Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Thompson is here and insists on seeing you. She says it's urgent." "Yes, sir. Of course, sir." She hung up the phone and looked at me with a forced smile. "You can go in, Mrs. Thompson. He's waiting." I thanked Emily and walked to Mr. Peterson's office. I knocked on the door and heard a muffled, "Come in." I opened the door and entered. The office was small and stuffy, full of stacks of papers and files. Mr. Peterson sat behind his desk, his face wrinkled and worried. He was a middle-aged man with thinning hair and thick-rimmed glasses. He had worked for Thompson & Sons for over 20 years. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice hesitant. "What brings you here?" "Good morning, Mr. Peterson. I need to talk to you about my father-in-law's will." His face paled. I can't discuss that with you, Mrs. Thompson. It's a confidential matter." "I know it's confidential, Mr. Peterson, but I need your help. I was excluded from the will. After 30 years dedicated to the company, I received nothing." He looked away, nervous. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, but there's nothing I can do. I know you know things, Mr. Peterson. You always knew everything. You saw how much I worked, how much I sacrificed. You know I deserve something." He sighed and ran his hand through his hair. "I can't get involved in this, Mrs. Thompson. I could lose my job. Don't you think I know that? But I need your help, Mr. Peterson. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to fight for what's rightfully mine. And if you help me, I promise I'll protect you." He looked me in the eyes, evaluating my determination. I saw a glimmer of compassion in his gaze. "What do you want me to do?" he finally asked. "I want you to tell me everything you know. I want to know about the company's finances, about secret agreements, about money transfers. I want to know everything that can help me prove that I deserve a part of the inheritance." He hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "I don't know if I can do this, Mrs. Thompson. It's very risky." "I know it's risky, Mr. Peterson, but I need your help. Please, you're my only hope." He looked at me for a long time, the silence heavy and tense. Finally, he took a deep breath and said, "I'll help you, Mrs. Thompson, but you need to promise you'll protect me. If anyone finds out I told you anything, I'm finished." "I promise, Mr. Peterson. I'll protect you with my life." At that moment, I felt a ray of hope. I had gotten what I wanted. I had an ally inside Thompson & Sons, someone who knew the company's secrets and was willing to help me. But I knew the road would still be long and dangerous, and that my promise to protect Mr. Peterson would be tested soon. The next step was to figure out where to start digging, and perhaps most importantly, how to convince John that I wasn't the villain of the story, but the victim. That conversation, I knew, would be the hardest of all. Mr. Peterson's words hung in the air, loaded with promise and danger. "I'll help you, Mrs. Thompson. The relief I felt was almost palpable, as if an enormous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But the euphoria was short-lived. The promise to protect him was a heavy burden, a commitment I knew could have devastating consequences. "Where do we start?" I asked, my voice still trembling. Mr. Peterson sighed, running his wrinkled hand over his face. "The problem is that almost everything is in the digital system now, but there are some old files, reports from years ago, that are still stored in boxes in the warehouse. Things my father-in-law never bothered to digitize." My eyes lit up. "The warehouse. Where is it?" "In the basement of the old office across town. Nobody's used that place for years. It's dusty, full of cobwebs, but we might find something there." "When can we go?" I asked, anxiety consuming me. "As soon as possible. The longer we wait, the greater the risk of being discovered. But we need to be discreet. No one can know we're going through those files." We arranged to meet that night, after work hours, in the parking lot of the old office. Mr. Peterson would give me the key and explain what to look for. The idea of rummaging through a dark and abandoned basement gave me chills, but the prospect of finding evidence that could help me reclaim my life gave me courage. I left Mr. Peterson's office with my heart racing. I needed to stay calm, act normally, so as not to raise suspicions. I returned home, trying to disguise my agitation. John was in the living room, reading the newspaper. "Where have you been?" he asked, frowning. "I needed to sort some things out," I replied evasively. "Company things." He nodded without insisting, but I could feel his gaze on me, suspicious. I knew I couldn't hide the truth for much longer. I needed to tell him about the will, about my exclusion, about my decision to fight. But not now. I needed to wait for the right moment, when I could explain everything clearly and calmly. That night, after dinner, I waited for John to fall asleep on the couch. I put on dark and discreet clothes, grabbed a flashlight, and left the house without making noise. I drove to the parking lot of the old office, my heart beating hard in my chest. Mr. Peterson was already there, waiting beside his car. He handed me a rusty key and explained how to find the warehouse. "Be careful, Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice worried. "That place is dangerous. And if someone sees you in there—" "I'll be careful, Mr. Peterson," I replied, determined. "And thank you for everything." I took a deep breath and walked to the side door of the building, the key trembling in my hands. I opened the door carefully and entered the old office. The air was heavy and dusty, the smell of mold permeating everything. The darkness was almost total, only the faint light of the flashlight guiding me. I went down the stairs to the basement, each step creaking under my feet. The silence was deafening, only interrupted by my own racing heart. I reached the basement and turned on the flashlight, illuminating the dark and damp space. The warehouse was chaos. Boxes stacked to the ceiling, papers scattered everywhere, old furniture covered in dust, cobwebs hanging like macabre curtains. I felt a shiver down my spine, but took a deep breath and began searching. I rummaged through box after box, going through old papers, dusty reports, outdated contracts. Nothing that could help me. Frustration began to take hold of me, but I forced myself to continue. After hours of exhaustive searching, when I was almost giving up, I found a box hidden in the back of the warehouse, behind a pile of old furniture. The box was sealed with tape, and the accumulated dust indicated it hadn't been opened for years. With trembling hands, I opened the box. Inside, I found a series of old documents, financial reports, bank statements, and a letter. A handwritten letter, dated 20 years ago, addressed to my father-in-law. With my heart in my throat, I opened the letter and began to read. The words jumped out at me, revealing a web of secrets and manipulations that left me shocked. The letter was the proof I needed. Proof that my father-in-law had used, deceived, and robbed me during all those years. Proof that I deserved a part of the inheritance. At that moment, I felt a mixture of anger, relief, and revenge. I had the weapon I needed to fight, but I knew the battle was just beginning, and that revealing the truth would come at a high price, especially for John. What would he do when he discovered the truth about his father? And how would I deal with the inevitable family explosion that was to come? The night had barely begun, and I already felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. The next step was to decipher the financial labyrinth described in the letter, and for that, I would need specialized help. Who could I turn to without raising suspicions? That was the new riddle to be solved. The letter trembled in my hands, the cursive handwriting dancing under the flickering light of the flashlight. Each sentence was a stab, each paragraph a new blow. With every line I read, the image I had of my father-in-law crumbled, revealing a calculating and cold man capable of manipulating and deceiving even the closest people. The letter detailed a complex scheme of fund diversion, secret accounts in tax havens, and obscure investments, all meticulously planned to evade taxes and hide part of the company's assets. And worst of all, the letter insinuated that I had been used as a front for some of these transactions without my knowledge or consent. Rage consumed me, burning like acid in my veins. Years of hard work, dedication, and loyalty thrown in the trash by a man I considered a father. The betrayal was so deep, it hurt physically. I took a deep breath, trying to control my emotions. I needed to stay calm, analyze the situation clearly. The letter was a bomb, but it was also the key to my liberation. With it in hand, I could prove my innocence and claim the part that was due to me. But for that, I needed to decipher the financial labyrinth described in the letter. I needed to understand the numbers, the accounts, the investments, to be able to present a solid and irrefutable case. And for that, I needed specialized help. But who to turn to? I couldn't trust just anyone. I needed someone discreet, reliable, and experienced, someone who wasn't connected to the Thompson family and wouldn't raise suspicions. I thought of some friends, former work colleagues, even some lawyers I knew, but none of them seemed like the right choice. The risk was too great. The possibility of information leaking was scary. That's when I remembered Sarah, an old college friend who had become a renowned financial consultant. Sarah was intelligent, perceptive, and above all, extremely discreet. I had lost touch with her a few years ago, but I knew she still lived in the city. The idea seemed risky to me, but also promising. Sarah was the perfect person to help me unravel the letter's secrets. But how to contact her without raising suspicions? How to explain the situation without revealing too much? I decided to take the risk. I took my phone and looked for Sarah's number in my contact list. I hesitated for a moment, with my finger hovering over the dial button. But the determination to fight for what was mine propelled me. I took a deep breath and dialed the number. The phone rang a few times, and then I heard Sarah's familiar voice on the other end. "Hello?" she said with a tone of surprise. "Sarah, it's your name. How are you?" I asked, trying to sound as casual as possible. "Oh my, your name. It's been so long. What a nice surprise. Everything's great here. And with you?" she replied enthusiastically. "Everything's fine too. I was thinking about you these days and decided to call you. So glad you answered." "Same here. I love the surprise. What brings you to call?" "Well, actually, I need some advice from you. Something kind of complicated, and I thought you'd be the ideal person to help me. You can count on me. What happened?" "It's a long story. Could we meet to talk?" "I'd prefer to explain in person." There was a brief silence on the other end. "Of course, we can arrange that. How about tomorrow afternoon? What time would be good for you?" We arranged to meet at a discreet cafe, far from the curious eyes of the city. I hung up the phone with a mixture of relief and anxiety. I had taken the first step to unravel the letter's secrets, but I knew the meeting with Sarah would be crucial. I needed to be careful, persuasive, and above all, honest. I went back to searching the basement, looking for more clues, more information that could help me build my case. I found some additional documents, old bank statements, and copies of contracts, but nothing as revealing as the letter. Dawn was breaking when I finally left the basement, exhausted but determined. I left the key with Mr. Peterson and returned home, trying not to wake John. I lay in bed, but sleep didn't come. The letter, Sarah, the meeting, everything spun in my head like a whirlwind. I knew I was embarking on a dangerous journey, but I also knew I couldn't give up. I needed to fight for my future, for my dignity, for my life. And as the sun rose, illuminating the room with a weak and yellowish light, I wondered, would Sarah believe my story? Would she help me unmask the truth? And most importantly, what would happen to my family when everything came to light? These questions haunted my thoughts as the silent battle for my inheritance intensified. The next day promised to be decisive, but a pang of fear told me that the biggest revelation was yet to come. Something in the letter, a subtle reference to a name, bothered me deeply, and I knew I needed to find out what or whom it referred to. The coffee exuded a comforting aroma, but the agitation inside me prevented me from appreciating the moment. I watched Sarah approach, her warm smile contrasting with the worry lines that marked her face. Time had been kind to her, but life, I knew, wasn't always fair. "Your name! So good to see you!" exclaimed Sarah, hugging me enthusiastically. "You haven't changed a bit." "You too," I replied, returning the hug. "It's great to see you again." We sat at a discreet table in the corner of the cafe, away from curious ears. The atmosphere was cozy, but the tension between us was palpable. I knew I had a lot to explain, and Sarah's reaction would be crucial to my plan. "So, what brings you here?" asked Sarah, her eyes fixed on mine. "You look worried." I took a deep breath, gathering courage. "It's a long story, Sarah, but I promise I'll try to be as brief as possible." I began by telling her about my life over the past 30 years, about my dedication to the family business, about the sacrifices I made to support John and his father. I talked about the hard work, the long hours in the office, giving up my own dreams. Sarah listened attentively without interrupting me. Her eyes showed compassion and understanding. Then I reached the crucial point: the reading of the will, my exclusion, the humiliation and anger I felt. I described every detail, every emotion, every thought that crossed my mind. Sarah paled as she heard my story. Her expression changed from compassion to indignation. "This is unbelievable," she exclaimed. "How could they do this to you? After everything you did for them?" "I don't know either," I replied, my voice choked with emotion. "But I'm not going to give up. I'm going to fight for what's rightfully mine." That's when I took the letter from my purse and handed it to Sarah. "This letter is the key to everything. It was found in the company's old warehouse. It details a scheme of fund diversion and tax evasion and suggests I was used as a front without knowing it." Sarah took the letter with trembling hands and began to read. Her eyes scanned the lines quickly, absorbing every detail, every piece of information. With each paragraph she read, her expression became more serious and focused. After a few minutes, she finished reading the letter and looked up at me. Her eyes were full of shock and disbelief. "This is serious, your name," she said, her voice low and grave. "Very serious. If this letter is authentic, you have a very strong case on your hands." "I know," I replied, "but I need your help to decipher this letter. I don't understand anything about finances, and I need someone who can help me understand the numbers, the accounts, the investments. You're the only person I trust to do this." Sarah hesitated for a moment, evaluating the situation. "Your name. I'd love to help you, but you need to understand this could be dangerous. If someone finds out I'm involved in this, I could have serious problems." "I know, Sarah, I understand, but I promise I'll protect you. I'll do everything in my power to ensure you don't get involved in anything wrong." Sarah looked me in the eyes, evaluating my sincerity. I saw a glimmer of determination in her gaze. "All right," she said finally, "I'll help you. But you need to promise me you'll be honest with me at all times, and that you'll follow my advice, even if you don't agree with it." "I promise," I replied, relieved. "Thank you, Sarah. You don't know how much this means to me." Sarah smiled, a determined and confident smile. "Let's start then. Tell me everything you know about the company, about the finances, about your father-in-law. The more information you give me, the easier it will be for me to understand what's happening." I spent the following hours telling Sarah everything I knew. I described the company structure, the main clients, suppliers, employees. I talked about my father-in-law's management style, his habits, his secrets, his obsessions. Sarah listened attentively, writing everything down in a notebook. She asked precise and insightful questions that forced me to think about things I had never noticed before. By the end of the afternoon, Sarah had a complete picture of the situation. She had deciphered much of the financial scheme described in the letter and already had some clues about where to look for more information. "I need some time to analyze all this," said Sarah, closing the notebook. "I'm going to study the letter carefully, check the numbers, research the accounts and investments. I'll contact you soon with an action plan." "That's fine," I replied. "I trust you, Sarah. Do what you think is best." We left the cafe with a mixture of hope and apprehension. I knew I was taking an important step in my fight, but I also knew the road would still be long and dangerous. As I walked away from the cafe, I felt a shiver down my spine. A strange sensation, as if I were being watched. I looked back but saw nothing suspicious. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe it was a premonition that something bad was about to happen. Suddenly, I remembered something that had bothered me in the letter. A subtle reference to a name I couldn't identify. The name was Silas, and it appeared in an obscure context, related to an investment in an offshore company. Who was Silas, and what was his role in this entire scheme? I decided I needed to discover Silas's identity. Maybe he was the missing piece to complete the puzzle. But how to find him? Where to start looking? The answer came in the form of an old business card I found at the bottom of my purse. A card from a private detective I had met a few years ago at a company event. His name was Ricardo, and he was known for his discretion and efficiency. I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity and determination drove me forward. I took my phone and dialed the detective's number. I needed to find out who Silas was, and Ricardo was the right person to help me. The final revelation. 3 weeks later, Ricardo's investigation had uncovered the shocking truth. Silas wasn't just a business partner. He was my father-in-law's illegitimate son, born from an affair decades ago. The offshore investments were actually a way to funnel money to Silas while keeping him secret from the family. But there was more. Sarah's financial analysis revealed that I had unknowingly signed documents that made me a legal partner in several of the company's ventures. My signature was on incorporation papers, loan guarantees, and investment agreements. Documents I thought were routine paperwork, but were actually binding legal contracts. The confrontation with John was explosive. When I presented the evidence, his world crumbled. He discovered not only his father's deception, but also the existence of a half-brother who had been receiving family money for years. Susan's triumphant smile vanished when she realized that legally, I had a stronger claim to the inheritance than either of them. The legal battle lasted 8 months, but the evidence was overwhelming. The court ruled in my favor, awarding me 60% of the estate. John, devastated by his father's betrayal, ultimately supported my case. Our marriage survived, stronger for having weathered the storm together. Susan contested the decision, but eventually accepted a settlement. Silas, when contacted, revealed he had been trying to legitimize his relationship with the family for years, but had been repeatedly rejected by our father-in-law, who preferred to pay him off rather than acknowledge him. Today, I run Thompson & Sons alongside John, finally receiving the recognition I deserved all along. We've also welcomed Silas into the family. He turned out to be a skilled businessman with fresh ideas for the company. The old photo album sits on my office desk now, not as a painful reminder of injustice, but as proof that perseverance and courage can overcome even the deepest betrayals. Sometimes the fight for what's right isn't just about money or property. It's about dignity, recognition, and the power to rewrite your own story. Did this story of justice and perseverance inspire you? If you enjoyed following this incredible journey of courage and determination, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories of people who refuse to give up. Also, we'd love to know, what city are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. Your support helps us bring you more incredible true stories from around the world. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads.